What's going on, everybody? My name is Aiden and welcome back to another video. Ladies and gentlemen, we haven't really discussed this yet in relation to our new acquisition, but I want to talk more in detail about what Chris Duarte can bring to the Chicago Bulls. Now, as I mentioned in the last video with DeMar DeRozan obviously being traded to Sacramento, I obviously have explained that I'm not necessarily very happy with the return that we got, but ultimately it's a return at least, and we could have ended up having nothing. So with that being said, Chris Duarte is a Chicago Bulls player. Whether we like it or not, he is someone that has a point to prove. And with that being said, we need to try and look at his strengths and his weaknesses and try to figure out where he's best going to be used for the Bulls if he gets some playing time for this team. But before we get any further, if you liked the video and you want to see more from me, drop a like, drop a follow, and or subscribe if you are new. And let me know in the comments below your thoughts about the Chicago Bulls and Chris Duarte. Do you see this relationship working well together? And ultimately, will he be a long-term prospect for the Chicago Bulls? Now, the first thing I'm going to mention, and I've already mentioned it at the beginning of the video, there is a point to prove now for Chris Duarte. He had a very good first season with the Indiana Pacers. He played 28 minutes per game, averaged around 13.1 points per game, was a very good shooter in his first season. I think he shot 36% from the three-point line, which is a big thumbs up from me, but it's been downhill ever since. He had a fairly okay second year. The minutes dropped massively for him in his second year with the Pacers, and then obviously with the Kings, his minutes jumped off a cliff, and he barely got any action for the Sacramento Kings, which produced his worst season in the NBA by a country mile, ladies and gentlemen. I guess last season for the Sacramento Kings, I should say, he averaged around 4 points per game, 3.9 to be exact, and he also averaged 0.7 assists with 1.8 rebounds, and that's in 12 minutes of action with 59 games played. So look, honestly, with those amount of minutes, I do expect a little bit more than that, to be honest. I expect more than 4 points per game and little to no assist, in all honesty. But, again, 12 minutes, especially if they're spaced out, it's very hard to kind of get a rhythm when it comes to game time and getting into the state of the game and being ready straight away and stuff of that nature. It's very similar to the Andre Drummond situation we had with the Bulls for quite a couple of times. Heck, even Dwight Howard mentioned something along those lines before I guess he left the NBA, saying that, yeah, he averaged 15 minutes per game, I think, but he's getting maybe 3 or 4 minutes each time, and that all up adds to 15 minutes, and you can't really do much within 3 to 4 minutes of action. I understand it, but I still expect a little bit more, which is why I made the bold prediction, and I don't know if many people agreed with me when I said this, but I made the bold prediction that Chris Duarte, this is kind of his last chance in terms of the NBA. If he does not make an impact in this upcoming season for the Chicago Bulls, if he is to stay here, of course, then we could see Chris Duarte out of the league. That's how serious this situation is. We've seen it with guys like Chris Dunn, and Chris Dunn did make his way back into the league, but when you fail to impress on multiple teams are less likely to give you that opportunity. He has now an opportunity with the Bulls. He's most likely going to play more than 12 minutes per game with the Bulls as well, so this is his time to make an impact. So, as I mentioned before, a point to prove. And there's no other time to prove that point than right now with this Bulls team. Let's hope he can do it. The second thing we need to talk about, he is a good shooter. He likes to shoot the three ball. He shoots more threes than he does twos, put it that way. He likes to be a guy that can catch and shoot. He just overall is a guy that is confident when it comes to shooting the basketball. That has got him some good moments in the NBA. Look, he's cooked us before, especially with the Indiana Pacers. He's been a guy that we simply couldn't stop from shooting the three-point shot. And to have someone like that on your team, it could be a bonus every now and then. Now, I'm not going to say he's going to cook every team from the three-point line each and every single game. But usually when you get players that love to shoot from three, you'll get the occasional game where he can make 5 or 6 and be the game changer in that game. And that is something that we'll probably see with Chris Duarte in the season at least once or twice, maybe even a few more times, which is something that, of course, we would like to see. He's a versatile player as well. He stands at 6'6", so he's a combo guard in many ways. I don't necessarily like him at the point. But he is considered a point guard in my eyes at least, but I don't like him really at the point. I kind of view him more as an off-ball guard and maybe even a perimeter, I guess, forward that can space the floor and shoot the three and be in the catch and shoot. I just don't necessarily think he has the creativity to be the point guard of the Chicago Bulls. That's how I view the situation. Let's look, we've got some really creative point guards already. Assuming we keep Lonzo Ball, he's definitely a creative point guard that could really make impacts in transition. Then you also got Josh Giddey, who I think is probably the most creative point guard that we have right now, and he is a guy that can really damage you in the half-court sets, not to mention a little bit in transition as well. He has the creativity to play making that point of view. So with Chris Duarte, I just can't see him being the point guard unless Lonzo Ball probably leaves or gets traded. That might be the only way I could see Duarte go into that point guard spot, but I mainly see him as a guy that can space the floor, shoot the three, who'll get the ball occasionally, and he can ball handle, and he can be the primary ball handler every now and then, but for the most part, I see him as an off-ball guard and someone that could potentially play as a small forward for the Chicago Bulls if need be. But unfortunately, there isn't that many strengths left to his game. He is someone on the defensive end. Look, in his college days and in his scouting reports, because I definitely read them, he was known as a pretty good defender, someone that could be a disruptor. Personally, his defensive rating looks, I would say, about average, to be honest. And I can't necessarily say he's a defensive disruptor, but this is going to be my own ignorance here. I don't necessarily know much more about Chris Duarte on the defensive end. His stats don't look great defensively. His defensive rating looks okay. That's all I could really say. It's probably going to be more about seeing him on the Bulls that I can make the assessment of how good he is defensively. But he's definitely not better than a guy like Caruso, for example. He's probably not going to be better than a guy like Patrick Williams, for example, or an Io, for example. But there could still be some good defensive, I guess, work there for Chris Duarte. He's not necessarily an athletic player, so look, this whole concept of Bulls playing faster and trying to move the ball as quickly as possible, it can still happen with Chris Duarte on the team, but don't expect him to be on the back end of a lob or a posterizer or the finisher in terms of the transition. I don't necessarily see that happening that much with Chris Duarte, especially with his lack of athleticism in terms of the NBA standard. And last but not least, we are not getting someone that has a lot of upside, I would say. He's 27 years of age. Again, he's only played 3 seasons in the NBA. So I'm not saying there's no room for improvement. You see guys like Javonte Green that is older but has had limited time in the NBA. He gets better every season. There's, of course, development there with Chris Duarte. Don't get me wrong. And even guys like Caruso, still producing and still improving at his age because of the limited time he's had in the NBA. But I wouldn't necessarily say there's superstar potential or anything like that with Chris Duarte. You'll probably get slight improvements every season if you give him the chances, but ultimately, I think you're going to get a role player at the end of the day, and that's probably what he's going to turn out to be. And at 27 years of age, I would say it's more of a short-term deal for Chris Duarte on the Bulls than you expect it to be a long-term deal with Chris Duarte on the Bulls. So keep those things in mind when you're thinking of him as a, I guess, prospect for the Bulls in the future. It just doesn't seem to me like a logical reasoning to keep him long term. But of course I could be proven wrong, and we'll just have to wait and see if we are proven wrong. But those are the positives and the negatives of Chris Duarte. I felt like it was very important to make this type of video because last video we had the whole DeMar DeRozan goodbye and stuff of that nature, and it was mainly focused around DeMar DeRozan and just getting the best wishes for him, and hopefully he can have a great time in Sacramento. But again, we got to move on from the DeMar DeRozan situation now. We've got to move on from hopefully a lot more of our core pieces in the near future. Chris Duarte is a Bulls player as of today, and I feel like that is still... it still means something, and it's important to discuss whether we like the player or we don't, whether we think he'll thrive or whether we don't. It doesn't necessarily matter. It's still important to talk about, and hopefully he can make his, I guess, chance. He can take his chance, because that's what we're going to need from him. But ultimately, it is what it is. What do you guys think? Am I right? Am I wrong? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Drop a like and a follow, and or subscribe if you are new, and I will see you in the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay tuned for more. Take care, and peace.